Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin, she wasn't there, but she's becoming one of the leading voices for her party, not just on a local level, but nationally as well. We spoke with the U.S. Senator about the convention, the behavior, and whether she fears that her party is moving too left.
I'm in the business of expanding the tent and expanding the number of people who can participate in Democratic events, not limiting. I didn't know that the Republicans charged. I don't think that's something that the Democrats would consider. I don't think that makes sense. You shouldn't have to pay to be involved in a democratic process. And I think what's interesting is actually before the convention, there was a movement to move up the primaries in Michigan for both the Democrats and Republicans, make them earlier in the year. Our August primaries are kind of late. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that if we moved up the primary on a bipartisan basis, then we'd have to take a look at things like the convention and square that with an earlier primary. I think we had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of attendance, which is a positive thing. I think from some of the videos I saw and some of the reports I got, there was some behavior and some language and that I just do not approve of. I think we should all reject that kind of approach to politics. I think that it's important always in a swing state like Michigan that, I know from my own election, which was the closest, Senate race in the country in 2024, you have to appeal to a broad group of people to win in a swing state. You can't just appeal to voters in your base, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. You have to think expansively. And if you don't, you're just not going to win in this state. And that's just a numerical thing.
Now to the war in Iran. Senator Slotkin recently voting to block sending U.S. weapons to Israel. How does the senator define success? Also, as she's made headlines for a video she made with other senators telling service members that they can disobey illegal orders. Does she think the president or Secretary Hegseth has given any illegal orders? She covered all of this.
We're in sort of a bit of a stalemate. We've got a temporary ceasefire, which is good, but the U.S. and Iran are still kind of firing back and forth. Israel and Lebanon are still firing back and forth. There's a blockade and nothing can get through the Persian Gulf. I served 3 tours in Iraq and I saw warfare up close, and it's really important to have clear objectives when you get into war. So for me, I voted on these war power resolutions in the House or in the Senate, excuse me, many times now because I think it's easier to get into a war than it is to get out. We certainly need the Strait of Hormuz. We need the Persian Gulf open. You got to be able to ship oil and fertilizer for the farmers and petrochemicals and everything else that goes through that tight area. I'm no friend of the Iranian government. So hurting their nuclear capabilities, their ballistic missile capabilities, their military missile defense capabilities, their drones have particularly been effective against us. These kind of cheaper drones, kamikaze drones, they can't be able to kill U.S. forces and use these drones against us and kind of just go on with our lives. That's not success. I need to see the military capabilities significantly and long-term diminished and some sort of a deal that confirms that over the long term. On this war, to my knowledge, I have no knowledge that they've issued illegal orders. But what I did see the president of the United States say on Twitter was, let's just basically obliterate the Iranian civilization, right? Just wipe it off the map. That kind of language from a president means something. I have no indication that that attack on that school, which was a tragedy. That is loss of children, of civilian life, of just innocence. I have no indication that that was intentional. So please get a third-party objective investigation, right? Show that to the American people. I don't want people thinking that about the Department of Defense, but you got to show your math here.
Also tonight, the price of gas. It's quickly becoming a major issue. In June of 2022, under former President Biden, the national average was around $5 per gallon. The question is this the #1 concern for voters heading into the midterm election?
I think President Trump won the last election in 2024 on bringing down the cost of living. He said he was going to do it. That was what he was exclusively focused on. And I think he won the election over it. He just hasn't done that kind of bold action on costs the way I think he said he was going to. He's effectively become a foreign policy president. He's taken military action in 9 places in the world in his first 14 months, more than any president in U.S. history. So that's where his attention is. That's where his focus is. The people I've talked to, again, lots of people who voted very proudly for President Trump, are just like, look, I wish the bold action that I see on national security stuff was instead focused on domestic issues, on our economy, rather than somewhere very far away.
The first bill Senator Slotkin sponsored after taking office last year was to ban Chinese cars being sold in America. She says this is both an economic and national security issue, but Chinese companies have research and development in the U.S. already. Is her stance against Chinese vehicles too little, too late?
You bring in a car from BYD, right? That's a Chinese company. And you bring it into the United States. It's taking full motion video. It does 3D mapping. It has geolocation of the driver, so they always know where it is. It can be hacked via your phone or a Bluetooth device and remotely piloted, driven from Beijing, and all that data on our military bases. Imagine Selfridge Air Force Base. Imagine our big infrastructure sites. All that's full motion video and 3D mapping going back to Beijing. No, as a former CIA officer, I just can't accept that as a national security issue.
But can the senator convince the president to get this done? After all, following her video telling service members that they can disobey illegal orders, the president accused her and the others of committing seditious behavior punishable by death. Does this hurt the ability for the two of them to work together?
Yeah, I mean, when someone calls for your death, for your arrest, investigation, and death, like over a dozen times, it sets off a chain of events of people threatening you, of physical intimidation, threatening your family, legal intimidation. He tried to criminally indict me for a 90-second video. Yeah, it affects our relationship. If the president wants to work on issues together, you know, I'll suck it up and work on those issues, because the mission is to bring home important things for my state. Look, we might have some choice words for each other, but it doesn't change what my job is, which is representing the people of Michigan, whether they voted for me or not, and doing good things that help my state survive and thrive.
It is important to note that this senator is not up for re-election until 2030.